Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Susie Spikol, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 258. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, stacyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of The Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Susie Spikol about her books Forest Magic for Kids and The Book of Fairies. Susie has spent nearly 30 years working as a naturalist at nature centers and spends her time reminding people about the wonders of open-ended play outdoors. In Forest Magic, she has created dozens of activities for kids and parents that are inspired by her work and the magic of the natural world. Her latest book, The Book of Fairies, is a field guide to fairies. She began this book when she was 8 years old, making up stories to explain what she saw in the natural world. The Book of Fairies includes real science peppered throughout its pages, as well as a fun and imaginative how-to-find section for each fairy. In this episode, I'll chat with Susie about her writing journey, how she included words in her book to help adults use their imagination alongside their kids, and how growing up in Brooklyn stoked her love of nature, as well as a few other things. Coming up. Susie Spikol, thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
Thanks, Stacy. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Me too. So let's dive in. What we're going to do today is talk about two of your new books, Forest Magic and The Book of Fairies.
Yes.
So I'd like to start with Forest Magic. Let's do this. Just tell us a little bit about this book, and then let's talk about what inspired you to write it.
Sure. So Forest Magic for Kids is really a book about the power of imagination that's kind of inspired by the natural world. So it's for children and families to head outside together. I kind of wrote it so that you could be a co-explorer with your child and go out and maybe look for gnomes or build a secret fort or make a magic potion out of the things that you find outside. It's really about connecting the deep imagination that we have and having that inspired by the natural world. So that's where Forest Magic kind of came from. That's what I'm hoping people get from it. Where it came from is I've spent about 30 years as a naturalist at a small nature center in southwestern New Hampshire, the Harris Center for Conservation Education. And over my course of time, I work mostly with children. I have noticed a kind of a shift of kids not spending time outside the way a kind of open-ended play. And I really wanted to write a book that celebrated that and reminded families and parents of the deep wealth of experience that can happen when you're just sort of outside pretending and imagining and using sticks and stones and bits of trees to come up with adventure. And I think it really frees up parents from feeling like they have to know like what bird they're hearing or what tree they're by. It's all imagination. So it's about story. So that's why I wrote it.
Good. And I want to go into a bit more detail about that. But first, let's also introduce The Book of Fairies, because there's a connection between the two. But tell people a little bit about the second book, The Book of Fairies.
Yeah, so I like to think of the Book of Fairies as sort of a companion to Forest Magic, although you can have you don't need either one to know the other one. But the Book of Fairies is like a field guide to fairies. That's how I think of it as a naturalist who spends a lot of time using field guides. It's actually a book I started when I was 8 years old, Stacy. I loved fairies. I still clearly do. And when you're 8 or 7 or 6 or any age, sometimes you don't know how come things happen in the world. Like, for instance, you might blow a bubble and notice there's a rainbow inside of it, and you don't know the science behind it or the why. So I would make up stories, and one of the stories I made up was there was a family of fairies living inside the bubble called Bubblinis, and they created the rainbows. And I kind of tucked away all of those made up fairies and continue to read everything about Eastern and Western and fairy folklore. And this all comes together in the Book of Fairies. And what I especially love about the Book of Fairies is there's actually on each fairy that's described, there's a how to find section. So it's really about going and reading and then going outside and searching for the signs of the fairy. And it's tapping into that imaginative power that nature gives us. So that's the Book of Fairies.
Very good. Okay, so let's go all the way back to your 8-year-old self. Is it correct to assume that you were the kind of kid who spent a lot of time outdoors in nature, digging in the dirt and bringing home critters and picking leaves and rocks and all that kind of stuff? Is that fair to say?
It is fair to an extent. I mean, I should say that I actually grew up right in the middle of Brooklyn. So it's not like I was surrounded by fairy magic forests in my neighborhood. I mean, there were cracks in sidewalks and abandoned vacant lots and little parks that my family went to. I was actually really a reader. I loved reading. I still do. And I was inspired to go outside and look for things that I read about in my storybooks. And a lot of what I read about were fairy tales. So it's kind of a funny way to get into nature. I would go out and I would look for gnomes or fairies or trolls in my little neighborhood in Brooklyn, or even pirates and mermaids. You get a big imagination when you're young. And then in my process of kind of exploring for those things, I discovered that nature is pretty magical in itself. A caterpillar turning into a butterfly is pretty magical. Birds singing that you don't know the song and you hear it far away, that's magical too. So it was really a combination. But yeah, I did spend a lot of time outside. I was very fortunate. My parents were school teachers, and in the summer, we would go to Vermont for 2 months. And that's really when I went into hyperdrive on searching for fairies. So I feel like I had a city life experience, looked for fairies and trolls and things in the cracks of stuff. And then I would go to Vermont and look for fairies and gnomes and trolls in the woodlands. So it all went in and led me on a path to become a naturalist.
So I think it's a testament to your imagination that you were looking for fairies and gnomes and all that in Brooklyn, because it's definitely a city. I mean, it's a city exponentially, right? I mean,
Yes, yes.
it's concrete, and there aren't very many natural spaces, and the ones that are not large, and they're
That's right.
not the the city
They're
still
not,
crowds in,
yeah,
right?
they're
So
not like wild. They're not like wild
right,
spaces. Like, I live in a really rural place in New Hampshire now, and it's wild. Like, we have bear and otter and hawks and owls and coyotes, and it's very wild. But, when you're a kid, you don't need like big, vast, wild lands to feel like you're really connected to the natural world. And I deeply believe that. I mean, I had this secret hiding spot in Brooklyn that was between two garages. And it was so small, you could only fit in sideways. And I called it the sliver. And it had, like, bricks with moss on it and worms and snails and ants. And I thought that was like the biggest jungle of the world. I mean, its kid size is perfect. So it's good to remember, as parents, as educators, as caregivers, as anybody who's connecting with kids, that they have beginner's eye. They don't know that there's an Amazon jungle that's enormous. So the sliver between two garages is a lot of wilderness.
right,
For It
right.
was for me.
Yeah, I think as adults, we think, oh, well, if we're going to go look for fairies and magical creatures, we need a forest primeval. We need
Right,
to
right.
travel to find some place like that. Where you're right, as a kid, just any little patch of grass or wherever things are growing might serve the trick.
Yeah, right. It's all just a great opportunity to find kind of the magic nooks and crannies of wherever you are. And sometimes a wild place can be so big that it can be overwhelming to kind of wrap your head around. Like I was in Yellowstone recently and I was like, wow, it was just enormous for me. And I am more of like, what's happening in this tiny little patch of moss? So it's a scale thing. And I think for kids, as the smaller the scale, oftentimes the easier it is for them to grasp to connect to it, I guess. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Well, let's
Yeah.
talk about forest magic because, as you said, it's a book for kids and adults to kind of get back in touch with the outside world. In the book, you describe a number of activities
Yeah.
that people can do, and doesn't take a lot of equipment, let's say, but does require a fair bit of imagination. So, can you walk us through maybe a couple of these to get a feel for it?
Sure. I think one of my favorite parts of writing the book was a little bit about potions, which is just mixtures of things you find in nature. And it's usually stuff that's already on the ground. So you're not like picking off, leaves off a tree. And I was a big potion maker, and I have three kids of my own, and two of them were very big potion makers. I would just give them a bowl with a little bit of water, and they would throw in dirt and sand and leaves and pine needles and peel pine cones and get a stick and stir it up. And the idea that you can make a mixture and then you can imagine what the mixture could do. Like, I think in the book, I have a part where it's like a pine needle could be a unicorn's whisker. So it's kind of adding the magic elements. And what I really imagine, so, the book Forest Magic, it has a lot of text in it. There's a lot of words, and it isn't necessarily for your child to read independently. I really feel strongly like it's a great opportunity for families to do together and for parents to kind of be co-adventurers and to sort of set the stage and then to let the child's imagination kind of roll. And so potions is a really great example of that. You hardly need anything. You just need some old kitchen equipment, some measuring spoons. I like the old egg beater or a flour sifter, some big spoons. Cutting board is pretty fun. Some I've given out like choppers, those, because I don't even know what they're called. Choppers, you just chop stuff with them. And then the kids just get going, add a little bit of water. And what's great about the potion section is that it happens outside. So it doesn't make your kitchen messy, which as a parent, I learned pretty fast that I had potion making kids and they would make a mess out of my kitchen. And once I turned them loose outside, it was like a whole nother avenue of imagination and expression. So that's one example. And another example that I spend a lot of time doing with kids is fort making. So just using sticks that you find and leaning them up against maybe a rock or a side of a tree and building a little cozy spot for you to crawl into. And I mean, that can feel really almost otherworldly for a child. They can imagine they're, on a ship or in a castle. It becomes their place that they go to. And in my backyard, my kids are grown up now, but in my backyard, we still have some of the remnants of their fort. And sometimes when they come home, they like to go check it out again.
Well, I like what you said there about there being a lot of words in the book, but the words aren't necessarily for the kids
Right.
because that seems true. I don't think most children would require a lot of instruction on, say, building a fort or making a magical potion, right? Here's some
Right.
water and a bowl. Let's see what we can do. My sense is kids probably can run with that.
Oh, yeah.
It's the parents that probably need a little more instruction. Okay, pine needles, think of them as unicorn whiskers. And it might take a little bit of prompting. And
Yes,
before
yes.
the parents naturally would go, okay, okay, I've got it. I think I'm into it now.
A
Um,
100%, Stacy. You are right on. That is, yeah, that's perfectly said. And that's really how I wrote the book. It's really, even if you're a parent who, spends time kind of reading it and then goes out and just helps kind of set the stage or set the tone for the adventure. And there's a lot of science in the book. It's forest magic for kids. And I love the idea of magic and fairies and folklore and stories and all of that. But I am a naturalist, I'm a scientist, and I kind of peppered throughout. There's whole section, there's a whole chapter on mushrooms. And some of my favorite mushrooms are the bioluminescent ones that glow in the dark, like foxfire or jack-o'-lantern mushrooms. And there is a section on, what is bioluminescence? It looks like magical glow, but what's the science behind it? So if you're a parent that wants to know more about it and then be able to share with your child, yeah, this is it. And here's, we imagine it. And then your kid says, but really, what makes the mushroom glow? You would have the information there.
Handy. Very good.
And yes, right. Fairies. And
Well,
maybe you want to leave it at fairies.
right. So there are a lot of activities in the book. I'm curious about the research for these activities. Did you go out and test all of the activities? Did you get input from your kids or anybody else? How
Yes.
exactly did these come about?
Well, I'm so fortunate to have I have an incredible job over the past 30 plus years. I've worked teaching kids outside, and I really just have kids from ages pre-K, even sometimes younger, all the way up through high school kids. My sweet spot is that middle age of kids, kind of like the 8, 9, and 10-year-olds. And I have the opportunity to work with them in public schools, homeschools, after school programs, weekend programs, summer camps, things like that. So everything in the book, Forest Magic for Kids, has really come from my direct experience with children and doing all of those things. And I have another book prior to that too called The Animal Adventurer's Guide, and that's also true for that book, where it is all things that I've done as a naturalist and an experiential educator.
When you were a kid, is this the kind of book you would have wanted?
Oh my gosh. Yes, please. I would have gone crazy for a book like this. This was right up my alley. It's Forest Magic for Kids has like making little tiny, I call them peeps, or tiny little people like out of pegs or sticks or beads and uh, pipe cleaners, that kind of stuff. I was really into making small worlds when I was a kid, and I actually think the idea of small worlds is a really important play aspect of young childhood. It's kind of where a little person, a kid, is the boss of a big world. And it's all on the ground, and they get to move stuff around. They get to make their choices. And so in Forest Magic for Kids, there's lots of opportunities for that. And that would have really spoken to me as a kid. I mean, I was a kid that had little tiny creatures that I brought outside. I had a dollhouse. My brother and I had big blocks that we built. Like we built a zoo every weekend. We built a big zoo with tiny little plastic animals and the wooden blocks, or Lego. And then building a fairy home, I was all over that, and still am. I don't know about you, Stacy. Do you like to build fairy homes?
I have never built a fairy home, I have to say.
You
Yeah,
should come
so
over.
yeah, so my knowledge of fairies is minimal at best. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the Book of Fairies,
Sure.
because this is, as you mentioned, really a field guide for all the different kinds of fairies. I had no idea there were so many. I
Oh,
had no
that
idea.
this is like an annotated version of the field guide.
So you were collecting these fairies since age 8, and all of these have now gone into this book. So I'm curious again about the research, because as you mentioned, there is lore around fairies. So how much of that did you kind of keep and incorporate,
Yeah.
and how much of it did you just decide, no, for me, this is
Well,
how I'm going to describe one or
that's such a great question. As somebody who practically eats books about fairies, I just love them. I read a lot. Like, yeah, I'm in my office and my bookshelf back there is just filled with books on fairies and fairy lore. And some of them are really old, like 1800s, and some of them are newer. I just love to read about it, but I'll tell you what, fairies have a very dark side to it, and I chose very consciously not to include some of the darker aspects of fairies. So they can be, in the lore, not very kind to humans, mischievous or even malevolent. So I knew I was writing for kids, so I didn't include any of that. I tried to keep the fairy folklore that I kind of gathered through these years from it's mostly Eastern and Western European folklores, as opposed to there's fairy folklore across the world, but I stuck with kind of what I knew from my own reading and through my own kind of childhood love, and I stuck with those fairies. So in my heart of hearts, would I like to write more about fairies and a whole nother field guide? Yes, I would, but I don't know. I don't know about that. So and then I took some names of fairies that might have been hard for kids and sort of translated them. Like in the book, there's a fairy called Twiggles, but it's really the dryads. And the dryads are like a whole group of tree fairies, but I sort of translated it into the Twiggles. I just felt like I wanted it to be accessible for kids in a way. And what's so funny about the Book of Fairies is when I first wrote it and handed it in to my publisher, each fairy description was like 1,000 words. And they were like, this is way too many words. So I had to cut it down to like 300 words, which was so hard for me. I think I'm not done with fairies. I don't know what's happening for me next in fairies, but
right. Perhaps
I'm
an adult treatise on fairies.
that could be, yeah.
Well, so do you have some favorites? I mean,
I do have some
probably love
favorites.
all fairies, but do you have some favorites among the ones in your book?
Yes, I definitely have some favorites. I am the book is divided up into air and water and earth and fire fairies. And a fairy that I really love and have always loved is the she fae or the wee folk. This is from Ireland, and they are like the mound people. And in Ireland, they have really important folklore and stories around the she fae or the wee folk. And there's like you don't build on a mound because the fairies don't like it, and you are respectful of these kind of formations on the landscape, and there's something really appealing about that, and I just felt like I wanted to go inside the mound and live with the little she-fae in the mound. And I have to give a shout out to my the incredible illustrator who illustrated both the Book of Fairies and Forest Magic for Kids. It's Renia Matiliano. She's from Greece, and her drawings, especially in the Book of Fairies, just I felt really gave a visual image that matched what I was imagining it to like perfection. And her she-fae picture is just really dear. Shows a little she-fae fairy tucking her baby fairies in bed under the ground on this mound on a starry night. And yeah, I mean, that makes you fall in love with fairies. So I love those. And then there's a fairy that I love that I invented when I was younger that made it to the book, and it's the Follettis. The Follettis are the wind fairies, so they're in the air fairy section, and they're like practical jokers. Like I thought it was funny how wind could make your hat blow off or like pull your kite up into a tree. And I invented these little fairies that were like pranksters, and I called them Follettis. I don't even know why. And I had written it down and I saved my notebook. So I had the Follettis. I do love those. And I like the fairies that are kind of a little bit naughty, like the pixies. So the pixies, that's where the word pixelated comes from. Not like on your computer where your screen might have pixels, but pixelated means like confused. And that was based on the idea that the pixies kind of confused you. You might be out walking on in a field, and the pixies would come and spin you around and then you wouldn't know where you were. And I just think it's kind of funny. It's a really interesting way to describe being confused, being caused by fairies. And maybe that's true. So
It might
I
be.
love them. I love all the fairies. It's hard to pick.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the illustrations because I'm curious how it was working with the illustrator, particularly as you mentioned with the Book of Fairies, because in this case, you probably had very clear visions of them in your head. But it seems like you're happy with the way she captured it. Was it a back and forth, or were you surprised more often than not that she got it right?
Oh, I've been so lucky working with the publishing company Gibbs Smith. Usually if you're a children's book author, you don't have very much say in what your images look like or even who they hire as an illustrator. And that can be really hard. But I was so fortunate because who they hired was incredible. She's so good and makes everything look so magical. And I put in like author's notes to the illustrator, like this is how I imagined it. And she followed it, but sometimes she did her own thing. And I almost love that even more. It felt really collaborative in a sense, even though we never spoke, we never directly conversed. It was a lot through um, kind of passing through the editor and the editorial team. I just feel like some of the pictures that she illustrated what weren't how I originally imagined it, but I was so pleased by it and I loved that kind of collaborative aspect of it. So, I'm a very open person, so I was open to her process as an artist, as I'm sure and hope she was open to my process as an artist.
Yeah. Just looking at the books, they're very colorful. They're beautiful. They're
Thank
beautifully
you.
illustrated. I imagine for an illustrator, this was probably a fun project to work on, right? I mean,
Yes.
it's nature and it's imagination and it's magic and yeah. I imagine
Yeah.
she had a great time. I don't know if she did, but I would imagine she probably did.
I hope she did, because I'm working on another one. So it'll be in the kind of suite of these books, and it will be based on flowers and
Oh, okay.
trees. And it doesn't have a name yet, but it will be an activity guide that will be really about flowers. I'm working with an herbalist on it too. So there'll be like teas and I don't know, herbalist kind of things. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I was going to ask what else do you have planned? So another book kind of
Yes.
in this series, or let's
Yes.
say loose series. How about like other goals? Do you know
Sure.
beyond this one what else you might want to do?
Well, yes, I do a lot of magazine writing, mostly nature-based, more for adults. So I write a lot for Yankee Magazine and occasionally Northern Woodlands Magazine. And I just finished up a big piece in the Old Farmer's Almanac for 2027 on small mammals that you might find around your garden. I really love writing about the natural world, so I would hope that I'll have more opportunity to do that type of writing. But the next thing that I really want to write after I finish my, I'll just call it green magic for kids, is some kind of creative nonfiction for kids about the natural world. So thinking about a story, maybe I'm a big fan of animals that get bad reputations, like skunks or fisher or slugs. So I like to show the positive side of those animals and the role that they play and the important role they all play in our natural world. So I'm imagining writing something in that vein. So you'll have to stay tuned.
Very good. So before we wrap up, I want to ask, did
Sure.
you spend your career, your other career, working with kids and adults and introducing them or reintroducing them to the natural world? Do you have advice for parents or guardians or loved ones of kids and how to, besides buying your books and working through the things, do you have advice for them on how to get out and enjoy the world outside the
Such
house?
a great question. I love that question. Yes, I do. I wish for us as humans to spend more time outside. I think our souls are hungry for it. I think that when we kind of get far apart from nature and think of ourselves as other than it, it causes lots of problems. And so really my hope for humanity is that we can spend more time outside and really deepening our connection. And I don't think it's that hard. It's stepping outside, looking up at the sky, breathing in the air, letting your eyes wander around what you're seeing. Even if you live in a city like Brooklyn or wherever, there's the natural world is still there and we are really a part of it. And so when we spend time outside in it, it fills us up and makes us feel better inside. Our mental capacity, our mental well-being is better, our physical well-being is better. So my advice is sort of sounds trite, but just do it. Go outside, even if it's for 10 minutes. And the best thing about the natural world is you do not need to be an expert to know about it. You just can go out and with your child or your loved one or whoever you're with, just look around and say, wow, look at the clouds today. Or can you feel the wind? It's multi-sensory too. What do you smell? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you feel inside? And I think if we as people did that more often, we would be a lot happier. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, we can always, everyone can use a bit more happiness. That's an easy way to get it, it seems.
Yeah, and I'll just add too, if getting outside is really hard for you, science is showing that even like looking out the window is really good for you. Take a break from your computer, look out the window, if you can't go outside for whatever reason, but get some fresh air in your soul.
Right, right. So, and maybe take a book with you, a book on fairies, perhaps. So if people want to learn more about you and the books and look for new releases, that kind of thing, where can they go to find you?
They can find me at my website, which is just susiespikol.com. And that's where I put up a lot of stuff. There's some videos, there's some other writing. You can read about the books. You can order the books off that website through bookshop.org or my independent local bookstore here in Peterborough, New Hampshire, the Toadstool, or also some other larger places online that you can order it. But go to your independent bookstore, go to your library, ask them to get my book if they don't have it.
Excellent. And if they want to, well, as you mentioned, if they want to purchase copy of the book.
Yes.
Local bookstores first, and then just about anywhere you can find them.
That's right. And you can check out my Instagram. I post pretty often to Instagram, and it's just Susie Spikol. It's a very uncommon name, so you probably won't find there aren't that many Spikols left in the world, sadly.
Well, Susie, thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast. And I want to wish you luck with Forest Magic and the Book of Fairies and the new one. We will look forward to that when it's ready. So congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far. Best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Thank you so much, Stacy. It's been a complete pleasure talking to you. I really appreciated it.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published, as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author, or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the Bookshop at the End of the Internet.